All right, so here is my audience. It's my dad. Quote, I was born with the devil in me. I could not help the fact that I was a murderer, no more than a poet can help the inspiration to sing. I was born with the evil one standing as my sponsor beside the bed where I was ushered into the world, and he has been with me since. End quote. H. Holmes. Today I wish to tell you the horrific and unnerving tale of H. Holmes, the so-called Beast of Chicago. Over the last 2 years, I have gone over several case studies, reports, and assignments relating to Holmes, and I have decided to share with you the knowledge that I have amassed surrounding the events of the Chicago World Fair. A con artist and a bigamist, Holmes was known as one of America's first ever recorded serial killers, believed to have killed anywhere between 20 and 200 people spread out across his life, most of which took place during the World Fair. Born circa May 16th in 1861 in Glen Matton, New Hampshire, Holmes lived a privileged childhood, showing high intelligence very early in life, although, as time passed, there were haunting signs foreshadowing what was to come. Holmes expressed an early interest in medicine, cutting into small animals and experimenting on them using morbid surgeries. It is even believed that he was responsible for the death of a young friend. Holmes' life of crime began early on, like many serial killers before and after him, with minor crimes, fraud, and scams, before evolving to brutal and horrific murders. As a medical student from the University of Michigan, Holmes stole corpses, using them to make false insurance claims, and it is also believed that he experimented on those corpses. In 1885, Holmes moved to Chicago, Illinois, known at the time as the White City. Holmes instantly began construction on a 3-story house of horrors, planning to turn it into a murder hotel in order to lure in his victims visiting the Chicago World Fair. According to the editors of History magazine, in order to hide the true layout of Holmes's castle, he hired and fired 3 different groups of construction workers so that he was the only one who knew the full layout of the building. The upper floors, of course, were used as Holmes' living quarters, as well as several other smaller rooms which he used as torture and experiment chambers, where he then also killed his guests. Holmes also had a collection of soundproof rooms, secret passages, disorienting mazes of both hallways and stairs, and he even had a fake elevator shaft that he would use to hang some of his victims. But, like the true genius that he is, he also installed trapdoors and chutes in order to move the bodies to the basement without being seen by any of the guests. In the basement, he also had torture tables, vats of lime and acid, as well as an incinerator in order to get rid of the bodies, which is why the exact count of Holmes's murders is still to this day not fully known. As Holmes felt police closing in, he took a drastic step towards obtaining enough money in order to disappear, making use of an old accomplice of his, Benjamin Pitzel. The 2 men hatched a devious plan to fake Pitzel's death in a lab explosion in order to collect a large insurance claim. Unbeknownst to Pitzel, Holmes was hatching a much bloodier plan. Holmes violently knocked Pitzel out before setting the man ablaze. He then left behind a suicide note before turning his attention to Pitzel's children, specifically the 3 youngest, Nell, Alice, and Howard. In order to avoid being caught by the police, he used the children to travel through state lines. And once he had made his getaway, Holmes removed the dead weight, first choking Howard to death before cutting him up into pieces and burning away the body. Alice and Nell were shoved into an ornate, heavy chest where he shoved a hose into the crack before slamming the top shut and proceeding to pump gas into the chest, killing the 2 young girls. After outrunning the police over a period of 3 weeks, H. Holmes' reign of terror finally came to an end, as Pinkertons caught up to him and the beast was finally put into a cage where he belonged. Before his death, Holmes was said to be very calm, his only request being that he was buried 10 feet underground and his casket encased in cement, ironically enough, in order to prevent grave robbers from stealing and experimenting on his corpse, like the true hypocrite that he was. In a true show of justice, Holmes was sentenced to a violent and brutal end through hanging. On May 7th of 1896, Holmes was taken to a scaffold, a necklace of rope around his neck. And the floor beneath him opened, and as he fell through, the necklace tightened around his throat. In most cases, those who were hung as punishment often died fairly soon after the trapdoor opened, as the rope tended to snap their neck. Unfortunately for Holmes, but fortunately enough for his victims and their families, he was not given that luxury. According to History magazine, over a period of 20 minutes, Holmes gasped and struggled for life until he was finally pronounced dead when the twitching of his body stopped. Most people have no idea of the bloody history of the horrifically intriguing serial killers who the United States has seen over the decades. It is my hope that, after this presentation on the very first serial killer who made use of some of the most fascinating methods of murder the United States has ever seen, that what you have learned has increased any interest you might have had in the dark minds of serial murderers, driving you to begin your own research into their morbid world.